Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the NATHPO conference. 21st National Tribal Preservation Conference. It's been a while. Here we are.
Woohoo!
Good morning, and thank you for persevering and getting this on board.
Our pleasure.
Good morning.
Linda, Raynella, are we ready with our opening prayer?
Yes, we are.
Dr. Laney, can you confirm if you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can all hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for the thumbs up, Miss Melissa.
Good morning, Melissa.
It's Valerie. I'm the Executive Director of NATHPO. I will introduce myself in just a few minutes, and we're going to have our generous host, the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, open us with a prayer today, and then a moment of silence.
Is everybody ready? You ready now, Val?
Go for it.
Welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce our tribal chairman, the Honorable David Sickey, who will give you a welcoming and start us off.
Well, good morning, everyone. From the great state of Louisiana and from the great sovereign nation of the Coushatta Tribe here in Southwest Louisiana, located in Elton. It's a pleasure to join you all this morning. Directors, leaders, and officers of the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation, distinguished guests, and tribal members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Sickey. I am the current tribal chairman of the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, this year's humble host and all-time grateful fan of this incredible conference and gathering. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the 21st National Tribal Preservation Virtual Conference, representing the only national organization devoted to supporting tribal historic preservation programs. Like all preceding years, the excitement and support for this conference confirm our unity as well as our devotion to protecting Native American identity, resilience, and culture. We know the importance of this guidance. We are the lived expression of its success. Our continued participation, we ensure future vitality through such a bold union of Native American voices. With that in mind, I would like to extend an especially warm welcome to all Native American tribal members with us, virtually, and those of the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana. Within our correspondence these last few weeks, my friend and executive director, Valerie Grussing, mentioned our tribe might have set a record as host for this yearly gathering. As I always do, I credit the wisdom and foresight of our elders for everything and anything that is right and good yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Supporting this gathering and having the provision certainly honors the perseverance spanning lives lived and shared over many lifetimes. I continue to pray for the longevity of the elders still with us. May God bless them and keep them. The theme for this year's conference is resilience in a changing environment. The goal is always the same: provision and guidance to those who are Native American and our allies in national Native American historic preservation legislation, policy, and regulation. This year's specifics will address how we can continue our tribal sovereignty, partnerships, and government within the challenges of global climate change and new political policies. Climate change and its complexity impact and resolve upon our land, resources, and sustainability readily aligns with Native American guidance and experience. Together with voices united and respected, educated and resolute, we share an abundance of understanding not only with each other, but with unequivocal care for our fellow citizens and communities around the country and around the globe. The task of preserving within an environment involving climate change is who we are. The innovation we need and will need is here in this room. As for politics, policy, and our presence, all I have to say is that we are still here. The weight of those words, the strength over the struggle they command for every Native American who was, is, and will be, can only be a reassurance moving forward. We are an us, many roles within one community. I want to invite everyone to join in prayer and blessings over this gathering of our voices and the continuation, if not the absolute health and vitality of Native American preservation. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please join me for a moment of silent prayer for those individuals, our families, our friends, our neighbors, and our tribal members who have lost their lives to this global pandemic. Please bow your head for a moment of silence. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, it is my high honor and a great privilege to introduce one of our tribal elders of the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, who will lead us in prayer and open up this wonderful conference. And my wonderful friend, Mr. Burtney Langley, will most likely lead us in prayer in the ancient language of the Coushatta Indians. That, by the way, is still being spoken fluently right here in Southwest Louisiana, in Elton of all places. So again, it's my high honor and a great privilege to introduce my wonderful friend. Real quick, Mr. Burtney Langley has dedicated his life to tribal public service. He has served in tribal government for several terms in the past. He continues to be a mentor and a guide to current elected officials of this tribe and members of our community. He has dedicated a lifetime of tribal historic preservation, language preservation and documentation, and making sure that our culture and traditions of the Coushatta are alive and well for many more decades to come. He's also a traditional cultural advisor to the tribe in our Tribal Historic Preservation Office. And most recently, he was honored by the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities for a Lifetime Achievement Award. So at this time, ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, please help me in welcoming our tribal elder, Mr. Burtney Langley.
Abachakoli and Itamachipahe. Yamut Itanakogi, who in another disc of the Milga Nasu comes to Amalgalali, Lubok Chimpel for Kamiskan. And it up at the Joseph was Simpelga to Kosati Silga. We get Yamos still the school, which is who in other schools discuss some Melka. Irritation as a Pahel. A careful, as near some versus come one woman. She looked at Magachi want to see it up with a piece. But the Gluma says to Bailey Fuya with the whole Kubana for Gamma Tanakostamala for a coastal piece. As in Sahalisons in Pakistan, in that Edison, a chick Potamala of Nasu comes and so her exubari Voganitas as well. We also know to know I charge Nasu Same. He not this kind of Magat, check it a Magat, Spoheli Mola Pigeon, Silgava. Acá me culpa kan su kubailo ni silga chules kan yalu famu ku enak su nai samu. Bueno, su batis kan kumati ya me kena mo lugulo. Ito mo ito su tonos to aga mo el pisin. Yani kan su to ku sa ka to mo tulit mat ku faitis kan kami ko sa pas el pisa. Mo ya kan su na kalo ya isa famu. Ito mo ito na tigat ito ko tamal ka. Mo ya kan alelo simpara fai go ni ta pa kamis kan ni ta ya sen. Ako i-charges ka ako project for ang simula fight ako ganang kamas kan. Jack postal page ni ita ko hiska. Mamu ita mo ko hiska mo Lord. Eso sale mo check ita mo lang mo ya. Para sa mga ita kamas kan. At juzi mo sila ni tale kamas kamelo. Amen.
Thank you, Chairman Sicky and Mr. Langley. We are so grateful for your hosting of the conference again and for opening us up today. Those were lovely words and sentiments, and I think what we all needed to hear. So we're so grateful for that. Welcome to the 21st annual-ish National Tribal Preservation Conference. It's been a long hiatus, and I'm so glad all of you are coming together with us here. I'm the new Executive Director, Valerie Grussing. I've been here since the beginning of 2019. The office is in Washington, D.C., which is the ancestral home of the Nacotchtank Indians, and I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I've been since March. As many of us have, and that is on the lands of the Piscataway tribe. My ancestors were colonizers, so I'm especially grateful for the opportunity to do this work because in the words of our youngest poet laureate that we're all familiar with now, being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. Tippos nationwide form a community, a family, and we are so delighted to have you at the reunion this year, along with so many partners and allies committed to protecting Native places. If you have something energizing in your mug, a NATHPO mug sporting our shiny new logo, thanks to David Burney on that. If you have one of those or an old favorite, put something energizing in it and share it with us. Sharing nourishment together is an important part of tribal gatherings, including the NATHPO conference, which we missed during this time. And our little gift package that we sent to early registrants is intended to represent this. Made possible by our generous sponsors, we especially thank our host, the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, Chairman Sicky, and Linda and Raynella, who worked so diligently year after year to make this conference happen. Our platinum sponsor, the Pala Band of Mission Indians, our chair, Shastagon. Our gold sponsors, the United Auburn Indian Community, Rebecca Allen, and NextEra Energy, Carolyn Stewart. Thank you so much for making our hospitality possible. So join me in raising a glass to family, friends, partners near and far, to resilience and to hope. Now, if you've got your program, I'm going to run through it briefly with you here. It can be found on our website, and I also emailed it again last night to everyone who registered for the conference. Prepare to be inspired as we celebrate the new NATHPO and its redefined dedication to you, grounded in improved engagement, member services, and partnerships. Thank you for joining us here to collaborate on what we're calling impactful, solutions-focused programming for 2021. The topics we'll cover in these 2 days of sessions are intended to be introductions to concepts and projects that we'll dive deeper into with dedicated virtual workshops and seminars throughout the year. Every session will have time for questions and discussion, and some even have targeted requests for your input. This is crucial as we shape our efforts to support you, our members, potential members, and even partners. Now we'll get to the board member introductions section of this session, which is intended to be the bulk of it. And it looks like we're doing a good job on time. We just had an election of a new slate of board members, and they represent each of the BIA regions. That was a revision to the bylaws from 2014. You can see them listed in the full program, and I'm delighted to have them introduce themselves to you and also to share a quick 3 to 4 minute success story from their program and their work as Tippos. We want to be sure and stay on schedule for Mr. Echo Hawk in 45 minutes here in the next session. So we thank you in advance for being mindful of your 3 to 4 minutes. I will call on each of you alphabetically by region, and that is starting with Alina Shively, Tippo for the Gina Band of Choctaw Indians representing the Eastern region.
Bonjour, Nindwe Maganaduk, Ojawagi Kukwe and Deshnakas, Gate Tkaning Dunjaba, Gina, Louisiana, and Danungo. Good morning, everyone. I'm truly honored to be here. Truly honored to have been nominated as the Eastern Region representative by my elder and mentor, Dr. Linda Langley. I made some notes this morning so I can stay on topic because I like to talk and I can get going on topics that I'm passionate about, so bear with me. I want to thank the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, the NATHPO Board of Directors, Valerie and NATHPO staff for coordinating this event and for allowing us all to come together. My name is Alina Shively, and I'm a member of the Lac Butte Desert Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians in Watersmeet, Michigan. I was the assistant Tippo for Lac Butte Desert from 2003 to 2010 and have served in both the deputy Tippo and Tippo roles of the Gina Band of Choctaw Indians since 2014. I began working for my tribe, Lac Butte Desert, at the age of 12 in multiple positions and capacities. And I also served as a tribal council member from 2004 to 2006. My husband, children, and I moved to the Gina Choctaw community in 2013. When I was asked to share a success story, I struggled with what to share with you all today. I've had a long time in service, and it's hard to choose just one success story, but yesterday, a very personal and special success story came to mind. My maternal grandparents are Dan McGeesick Sr. and Josephine White McGeesick. They married in 1930 at the age of 17 and 15 respectively. Though my grandpa Dan was from the Sakagan Chippewa community in Mole Lake, Wisconsin, and my grandmother was from Lac du Flambeau in Wisconsin, they lived their entire lives and raised all of their children at Lac Butte Desert, where they became members in 1988 upon our federal recognition. My grandfather was a trapper and my grandmother was a beadwork artist, widely known for her applique style beadwork and Ojibwe style puckered toe moccasins. My grandpa would tan hides and my grandma would make the most beautiful moccasins. They were an amazing team and lived a very traditional life. While my parents worked hard to provide for us kids, I spent most of my childhood with my grandparents, either at their home in town or at their home at the old village. And they are the ones that taught me about our history and our culture. When I was 8, my grandma began teaching me how to do beadwork. I would always ask her to make me things, and her response was always, "I'll teach you how to make those things yourself." When I was 16, my grandma gave me these moccasins as a Christmas gift, and I believe they're one of the last pairs she ever made in her life. And they're all I have left of her, and they're my most prized possession. The Gina Band of Choctaw Indians is a removed tribe, removed from their homelands in Mississippi by the 1830 Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. The tribe is very much in an emergency state of language and cultural revitalization. After a long hiatus of beadwork activity in the community, I began teaching beadwork classes at the Gina Band in 2015, along with Mrs. Cindy Tarpley, a Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma tribal member. Several of my students who have been tribal youth, adults, and elders have become exceptional beadwork artists who have created their own traditional Choctaw beadwork pieces and powwow regalia pieces. I'm wearing red dress earrings today, made by one of my most accomplished students, who happens to be my assistant here in the Tippo office, Miss Jonna Fisher. There's no greater joy for me than passing on my Grandma Josephine's legacy of beading and teaching. She is so much a part of me, the work that I do, and the reason I work to preserve culture. The smiles on my students' faces and their appreciation for the little knowledge that I've shared with them makes my heart burst and brings me purpose, focus, and vision for a brighter future. Teaching others has helped me learn the true immense value of cultural knowledge. It might not mean anything to anyone else, but it means the world to me. Culture is healing, beading is medicine, and beadwork stands the test of time. Once we're safe again, we will gather, laugh, and bead together again. And I can't wait for that day to come. I only pray that we stay safe until then. I only hope to honor my grandparents, my parents, and my ancestors in all that I do. Their survival from genocide, racism, boarding schools, and every attempt to eliminate us and our way of life is the reason I'm sitting here today. Both of my parents are boarding school survivors, and my grandmother was as well. Apajigo miigwech bizendawieg. Thank you very much for listening. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your coffee. I've got mine here. I look forward to serving you for the next year. And let's make this next year a safe and great one. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Welcome to the team. We're glad to have you. Thank you for your story as well. That was beautiful. Next, we have Everett Bandy with the Koapa Tribe of Oklahoma. He's the Tippo there, and he is continuing to serve for the Eastern region of Oklahoma on our board. Everett.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hawe NATHPO zani manche otis izaje abni hampade iwikere andagani. So I said, hello, all of NATHPO. I'm happy to see you. My Indian name is Manche Otin, which means strikes the chest. And my name in English is Everett Bandy. I am the director of the Koapa Nation Historic Preservation Program, as well as the Tippo for our tribe. I'm also an officer of our Native American church, a traditional gravedigger, and a fireman for our tribe. I just want to give you a brief introduction for myself. And then we wanted to talk about success stories. And so I wanted to mention a place called the Sherman Mound. The FCC tells me that this was the only place that there was an adverse effect finding for one of the positive train control towers that we were dealing with years ago. One of them was placed near the Sherman Mound, and there were adverse effects that happened. For example, the contractor parked heavy equipment on one of our traditional mounds. But through that, we were able to negotiate some creative mitigation, and we were able to sit down with the FCC and the contractor, and the resolution for that was that we were able to get archaeological studies done and visit the site and learn about portions of the site that we had no knowledge about, no written information on. And our tribe had moved through that area at a specific point in time, and there's not a lot of good archaeology in this portion of northeastern Arkansas, northwestern Mississippi. And so we were able to learn a great deal through that, and I just wanted to mention it. It's called the Sherman Mound, and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation actually featured it as one of their 106 success stories on Section 106. So if you guys would like to Google it or contact me later if you have an issue where you have an adverse effect, that's one example of a mitigation we were able to do through an unfortunate situation, but we were able to learn something good and resolve at least partially some of the adverse effects that occurred. And so anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself and share a success story with y'all. It's very good to see everyone, and I'm very happy that we're able to have some form of a conference this year. And I look forward to seeing you all in person in the future.
Thank you, Everett. It's wonderful to have you back on the board. And next we have John Eagle, Tippo for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And I'm not sure if he's with us. If you got my memo, hopefully he is. Do you guys see if he's, can you see if he's here, Shasta?
I'm here.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, John.
Good morning. Hamatach ape ampetikile chantewashte na pe chuzapalo. Kahakaska emacha ape na washichu ea John Eagle Senior Hemacha, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer Hemacha. Chanka oka tioshpa emataha na amle koyak mani tuahe mataha. Ahana lalawa eke ea kiksea po tokata wichoi chachi ki hena wachini api na mish ea hechimsi wiblukcha. Naha okola kiche ki ha ahana ea chante wajila na sula wajila he oyate wajila ktalo. Na mish ea hechimsi wiblukcha. My relatives, when I got that email that we were supposed to share a success story, that sounded like homework. So, but it also felt awkward to share a success story of mine. So what I said in my language was, of course, that I reach out each and every one of you with a good-hearted handshake today. Keeping in mind that really wasn't our way. It's something that we learned from mainstream society and we adopted and incorporated, you know, was to shake hands with one another. In my language, I told you that I'm Koapa Lakota. You know, that's who I was raised around, but my mom's actually Badewa Kantoa Dakota. And the dialect that I speak is the Lakota language. And I'm very fortunate, you know, to have been raised around my language, raised around my oral histories, and raised around my sacred knowledge. One of the things I expressed to you was something that one of my grandfathers said a long time ago. And he told us, he said, remember that the generations not yet born, they depend upon us right now. So I think about those things a lot. And then another thing that I shared with you was a long time ago, our societies. There was one that said, with one heart, one mind, the people will be one. And I think about that a lot because I actually got to experience that. I got to see that in vivid color. And that was when the Dakota Access Pipeline began construction at PCN 4, just north of our reservation boundaries. And I saw a beautiful thing happen. You know, a prayer went out and I saw that prayer go all the way around the earth. And a call went out first to the Ocheti Shakoi, the 7 council fires of my nation. And then it went out to our relatives. And that call was that if we stand alone, we were going to fail. And I got to witness over 300 tribal nations gather along the Cannonball River. And it was a beautiful thing to see them come dressed in their traditional attire, to see them singing their traditional songs and then bringing gifts and offerings to the Koapa here at Standing Rock. I got to see the best of who we were because it was a beautiful time, you know, that unity. But I also got to see, unfortunately, the worst of who we are. And I really strongly believe because of that experience that we have to make our way of life live again. We have to make our languages live again. You know, I served the United States Army. When I was being indoctrinated and sworn in, they asked me, do you speak a foreign language? And I said, yes. And they said, well, which one do you speak? And I said, English. This is in England. So I really appreciate those of you that expressed yourselves in your languages because those are the first languages spoken on this land. And as I was listening, it's interesting to me that I can pick out words. How can I do that? I'm way up here in the north, but yet when you speak your languages, I can pick out words and understandings from that. How can that be if we weren't at one time one people? So I think the greatest success of who we are is that unity. You know, in a consultation in Montana, the state of Montana, an archaeologist got frustrated with us because we express ourselves like this. And he said, define for me a site boundary. So I replied and I said, coast to coast, pole to pole, wherever the people walked, you're in a site of religious and cultural significance to my people. And that's the strength of who we are. And that's my hope in accepting this position with NATHPO, is that if we lock arms and make those old trade routes live again, if we lock arms and acknowledge those tribal marriages, our influence is going to go coast to coast, pole to pole again. And we're going to assert ourselves as one of the First Nations in this country. So with that, I'd like to say, Wopla Tamka Chichielo, you know, thank all of you for all that you've done, because I know now, being a Tippo, we sacrifice a lot. And it's not just us, it's our families, it's our wives, it's your husbands, it's our children and our grandchildren who sacrifice because we have to leave our homes. You know, we have to go to meetings, we have to do site visits. And for the Lakota people, it really doesn't matter what we think, who we are. What matters is what our people think. And our people define us. So for me, if you come to a traditional gathering here on Standing Rock, they're going to tell you that I'm a horseman. And maybe that's my greatest accomplishment, because when my people said that about me, in my mind, that made me like who my dad was, you know, who my grandfather was, my great-grandfather, my ancestors, to be called a horseman. So I hope all of you are happy, healthy, and safe, and look forward to that time and that day when we can be standing on Unchumukha, the earth, with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's a wonderful story. I'm grateful for that. And welcome to the team. We're glad to have you. Next, we have Cheyenne St. John, also continuing for her region in the Midwest from the Lower Sioux Indian community. Cheyenne, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you introduce yourself and share a 3 to 4 minute success story that's anything you want to talk about from your work as Tippo, your program?
Sure. Me, Cheyenne St John, Imakiapi, Tippo, Hektawani, Chashayapi, Hemataha, Damakota, Ka'a, Hahatua, Badewa Katua, Hemacha, Yushkia, Wachia Kakpi. Hello, everybody. My name is Cheyenne St. John. I come from Chashayapi, also known as the Lower Sioux Indian community in Morton, Minnesota. I'm Dakota and Ojibwe. I come from the Badewa Kantua band, also known as the Spirit Lake Dwellers. I am really excited that we are all able to connect here today. I recognize some familiar faces, and I just wanted to share really quickly a success story from our community. Let's see, my video was working just a minute ago. Let me see here. There we go. Okay. So we had a lot going on over this last year, and despite all of the challenges that we were facing here, well, everywhere, I'm really excited to kind of report that, proud to share that Lower Sioux Indian community, in partnership with our office, was able to complete the second phase of our community-wide strategic planning. So for anybody that's in tribal planning, we know that this information is really crucial for our tribal governments. It allows our leadership, our directors, and our planners to prioritize the needs of our community, our tribal citizens, our directors, and our departments. So I'm proud to report that Chashayapi was awarded a $1.5 million Economic Development Association grant to construct what is now being called the Lower Sioux Cultural Arts Incubator. This facility will focus on the revitalization and preservation of our traditional Dakota art forms. It will also focus on entrepreneurial artist training and intergenerational knowledge transmission. So my office is not located directly in front of or directly located in the government center, but every time I look out my window, I can see the construction of this building happening day to day. So when I was asked to report on a success story, that's the first thing that came to mind, because I can actually see that happening day by day. Aside from that that project, I mean, we have so many things across the state and across our Ochakee that have been really wonderful highlights and opportunities in partnership that wonderful opportunities and partnerships that deserve to be shared, and especially with the challenges that we've had in gathering and coming together, but for some reason those are slipping my mind. So I'm gonna save that time and let the next board member introduce themselves. But thank you, everybody. It's good to see you all here, and look forward to the conference today.
Thank you, Cheyenne. Wow, that's quite an exciting development. Congratulations on that. And we are glad to have you continuing on the board as well. Next, we have Richard Begaye, Tippo for the Navajo Nation, which is its own region. So he, of course, is continuing in service on the board, and we'll turn it over to Richard.
This is Shasta. I am not sure if Richard is with us. I'm looking for his name in our
I don't see it
in our list. And since he's not jumping on to interrupt me, I don't think he is with us yet.
Okay, we'll skip to the next one, and I will text Richard and make sure we're not having a time zone or other issue. Next, we have Jill Wagner, Dr. Jill Wagner, Tippo for the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and she is also new to the NATHPO board. Welcome, Jill.
And Jill, if you're here, you're muted.
Okay, now am I unmuted?
Yeah, perfect.
There you are.
Okay, sorry, I had to call in on the phone. I got a fancy new computer and I didn't know how to run it. So now we all know me. Anyway, Hestus Sweetsum, everyone. I am deeply honored to have been asked to serve on the board, be nominated, and be elected. Apparently I have Lance to blame for that, who's known me since college, so fair warning. And I am the THPO for the Coeur d'Alene tribe, have been for over a decade, and I am also a descendant of colonizers. So I think my first short success story out here, we've had a Tippo, I think 14 years now, 13 or 14, and except for the first 6 months, it's been me. And that has been a challenge as a non-tribe member. And so I have recruited a tribe member to take over here in a year or two, Nicholas Hager, my deputy, and he is on the meeting as well. And I'm very excited about that. Had to steal him from forestry as a tribe. And I think as far as 106 successes, our Cedar Grove negotiation, and Nick wasn't working for me yet then, but was involved in monitoring and helping with that. We had a highway fall down in the middle of a cedar grove, and being a Northwest tribe, of course, that's very important to the and for excuse me. So it was a big deal, and as the trees were coming down, I'm like, we need at least the cedar off of those. Was able to negotiate that with the highway department, and as you know, these things never happen just one person doing it. The culture program had people coming in to teach basket making, and we're able to do several years of cedar gathering in a matter of days. And we all learned to peel, me and several tribe members, of course, and basket makers. And now Nicholas, my deputy Tippo, or the tribe's deputy Tippo, is a cedar basket teacher and is learning many other traditional crafts through the job, which has been very helpful. And I believe we have 1 or 2 dozen new basket makers in the community. We still have part of the contract last 3 years on it to continue exploring the history and teach the language, because we couldn't hold up the highway until we could do that. It's the only east-west paved road on the reservation, so it had to be fixed. So it was a challenge, and got a lot of help on it, and I think it's a creative mitigation success story in an area that, you know, we're spitting distance from Ruby Ridge. This is not an area where tribes have a lot of success stories. So again, I'm deeply honored, and Lean Lunch, thank you. I'll keep it short.
Thank you, Jill. Glad to have you on the team. Next, we have Shasta Gawn, Dr. Shasta Gawn, the Tippo for the Pala Band of Mission Indians. She has been serving as our illustrious and diligent and brilliant board chair. And since we have a newly elected slate, we will be having elections for the officer positions again during our first meeting. So now she's just back to being a regular old board member and facilitator of the conference.
Good morning, everybody, and you're too kind to me, Val, but I am glad to be here. And for those who don't know me, my name is Shasta Gawn, and I am the Tippo for the Pala people of the Pala Reservation, and these are the Payomkawachum or Luiseño people and the Kupangawachum, the Cupeño people, and their lands are located in what the colonizers now call San Diego, California. And our Tippo office was established in 2009. Much like Jill, I've been the Tippo from the beginning. I'm fortunate to have a wonderful assistant, Alexis Wallach, who is also joining us today as part of the conference. And, you know, success stories, I feel like there's a lot that we could talk about. And I find that I really agree with what John Eagle said about success stories. And not that they're awkward for me. Those who know me know that I can talk forever. And I love to talk about the great things that we've been able to accomplish. You know, for example, getting some sacred sites listed on the National Register of Historic Places and adding traditional lands back into the trust part of the Pala Reservation. You know, those are all really, really important things, you know, and it's the little things that add up. But I also am always looking at what we have yet to accomplish. And for me, as some of my fellow Tippos, I am also not Indigenous. I am Anglo. My ancestors come from Sweden, Scotland, Ireland, Poland, and Germany. There's so much for us to do together as partners, and something I'm really looking to do over the next however many years it takes, but I'm feeling a little more hopeful, at least over the next 4 years with the change in administration, is to change some of the language around tribal historic preservation and change it from consultation to consent. And I think that's something that Walter Echohawk will be talking about in his keynote presentation, so I won't get into that too much. But for me, the greatest achievement, the greatest success we can have as tribes throughout, well, as Mr. Eagle said, from coast to coast and pole to pole, is consent. Because we can consult as much as the law allows, but we all know that consultation does not mean conservation. It does not mean necessarily even cooperation. It certainly doesn't mean that a project that might destroy something or impact something in a way that is, you know, not fixable is going to stop. And so we really need to have consent be a part of that conversation, so that when tribes are consulting, they're giving permission or they're not giving permission. And until we get to that point, then what we call sovereignty is almost a slap in the face. When you don't have that ability to say, these are our lands and we have the right to decide what happens on those lands, not just the trust lands, not just the lands that we were removed to, not just the lands that we managed to retain and not cede as part of treaties that were broken and manipulated, then what kind of sovereignty do we as Tippos, do all of you who are indigenous and tribal members and leaders, how is that really sovereignty? So that is my goal. And until I can say that when there is a project that has an impact on Paula lands, ancestral, not just in the reservation, because as Tippos, we all know we only get to decide about what's within our reservation boundaries. Until then, we don't have success. So that's my little rallying cry for what I'd like to see happen. And yeah, that's not a success story, but I hope it will be in the future.
Thank you, Shasta. I love that. I think that's such an important point to make. And I will say briefly that when I was at NOAA, the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, before I was here, I was on an interagency working group led by EPA that was looking at how agencies can be allowed to implement articles of the UN DRIP, even though the US has only endorsed it and not signed on. And so I'm really looking forward to Mr. Echo Hawk's presentation, and also how we, NATHPO, together with you all, can help drive this conversation in this new day that I hope that we're beginning to see. Next on the list, alphabetically by region, we have Michael Blackwolf, Tippo for the Fort Belknap Indian community in the Southern Plains region, but I don't see him logged on. Michael, are you here? Alrighty, for folks not currently with us at this time, we will come back around to their introduction at a time when they are able to join us sometime over the next 2 days. And that makes Lance next, Lance Foster from the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska in the Southern Plains region. He's the Tippo there and also the vice chair. And he manages to make time for us, lots of time for us, and we are so glad that he is continuing on the board for that region. Lance.
Hodakiwa, Dakawi, Pakojimike, Matoyo, Kirajimike, Irogre, Minaraike. I'm Iowa. I am of the Bear Clan, and my name is finds it. And there's 2 words in our language to find something, totally unrelated words. One is when you find something accidentally, and one is when you are looking for something, and that's what my name means. So I've been Tippo here for 7 years now. We were just new in 2012. We had a brief one, and then I came on in 2013, and it's been interesting. So as far as success, you know, I guess 2 things. First one would be we helped the Ho-Chunk, our relatives, put away the last people from the effigy mounds scandal that occurred for decades. So that felt really good to do that. And I guess the other one would be we had some land that was given back to us by the Nature Conservancy, which is in our reservation, that, as many people have experienced here through allotment, 90% of our land was lost by 1930s. And we've slowly been trying to get those back, mostly through our casino, which is very small and rural, so we don't have a lot of money like some tribes, but we've been slowly doing that. We own maybe 1/3 of our own reservation now. Our reservation is about 12,000 acres, so we own about, you know, maybe close to 4,000 acres now. So this was the quandary I had, you know, all our floodplains along the Missouri River, because where we are is like if you draw a line between Kansas and Nebraska and you meet the Missouri River, that's where we are. And kind of a small reservation. Part of that Indian removal, 1836 is when we were put here. And it's been interesting because we got this land, but it's been really impacted. All our upper lands, the prairie, has been put into corn and soybeans. All the bottom lands have been erased again for crops, but also levees and flood control, which you can see how well that works. So we have some bluff lands with oak hickory and some other kind of medicine plants and different species that that find refuge there. Just a little tiny piece, you know. So we're facing several things this year. We got that land back, and it had certain restrictions, no hunting, things like that. It became part of the deed. It was already part of the deed from the person that gave it to them. And we have 2 tracts. So we have this 444 acres of this Rule of Bluffs Preserve that came to us. And then we also have a Leary site, which is a National Historic Landmark. It's an ancestral village for us from about 1200 to 1400 AD. When we lived here, along with the Otos and the Irikara and Skidi people doing trading between the east and the west. So kind of responsible for that too. So I've been fighting for those. They wanted to tear it up several times. Twice since I've been here, I had to stand out for 6 weeks while they built a bridge to make sure they didn't do what they're going to do. And I was able to stop that anyway. But so I was trying to think, like, what's the imaginary thing? How can you save these things for the long term? I mean, because we know even all these laws don't help us for the long term. So I thought, you know, the national parks, you know, we all have issues with them too, but I looked around and I saw that Red Cliff up at Frog Bay had done a tribal national park. So I convinced, that's a good thing, I guess, being on the council now since last fall, just before the pandemic. Surprise, surprise, what a present that was. But anyway, so I was able to convince them to create the second by that name. Now we know there are other tribal preserves. We know there are other things that tribes have done, but apparently that was the first name, and I kind of got them excited about it, saying, you know, the national park doesn't tell us what to do. It's a tribal national park by that name. So we got that, and then we heard maybe through legislation we're going to get one of our missions back, which is a number of miles away. When we first got the reservation here, it was a lot larger, as most know. You have the same situation, and it kept on getting chopped down. Anyway, that's on some of our original reservation land about 20 miles away. So put all this under the same umbrella, right, to tell our story from when we first came here, and our plants, our medicine plants, and our ancestral village. And that's what this was. It says the connection was lost. I hope it didn't get lost, but anyway, that's what a success was for us, is that number one is the effigy mounds, and number two is creating a vision for our people to preserve those lands on our reservation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lance. We are so, so glad to have you continuing in service on the board. And we have 2 members left alphabetically, but the last one, I believe, has had a conflict teaching 2 classes this morning. That's Nicholas LaLuke from the White Mountain Apache Tribe in the Western region. And so he's newly elected, so we will have him introduce himself at a later time, hopefully today when he's able to join us. And so last but certainly not least, we have Kurt Dolgoski, Tippo for Zuni Pueblo in the Southwest region. And I've also asked him to actually introduce Walter Echohawk. So this works out great. We don't have a break scheduled, but of course, since we're virtual, we don't have to worry about squeezing out between people and not getting a chair when we get back. So obviously take breaks as you need them. And we will turn it over to Kurt. Welcome back to the board.
Morning, thank you. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. I've been a Zuni Tippo since 2008. In my position, I'm also the principal investigator for the Zuni Cultural Resource Enterprise, which is a for-profit cultural resource management firm that was established by the Pueblo Zuni Tribal Council in the mid-1970s. And the business has been active since then. And Firstly, about me is that I'm an Anglo, and I've been doing archaeology for 43 years. I've been involved with tribal consultation for the last 30 years. In 1991, I became the tribal archaeologist for the Hopi tribe and represented the Hopi tribe in consultation for 12 years, where I left in 2003 and then came over to Zuni and was a project director in the Zuni Cultural Resource Enterprise for about 5 years. And then I became the principal investigator and the Tippo for the Pueblo Zuni in 2008, a position I still enjoy to this day. Being the Zuni Tippo because I have an archaeology background, talking and interacting with Zunis was a real enlightening experience for me. And I've tried to incorporate it into the work I do as a Zuni Tippo. For example, for the last several years, I've been advocating, or for the last 10, 12 years, I've been advocating that mitigation of archaeological sites using standard data recovery research designs that are developed by archaeological contract firms and are easily implemented by federal agencies, because that's an easy way to do mitigation, does not consider the psychological, the emotional, or the spiritual and personal connections that the Zuni people have to these places. For Zunis, the archaeological sites are the homes of their ancestors, and they also mark the Zuni connection to the landscape because they had once resided in those areas and still have a connection to those areas on their landscape. The Zuni ancestors still reside at those places, but in a spiritual form. And so when Zunis approach archaeological sites, they then request permission to enter onto the homes of the ancestors and ask for guidance from the ancestors. All of Zuni ceremonial life during the year is geared towards maintaining this relationship with the ancestors. And so to just do mitigation through traditional Western archaeological science is to completely ignore and disenfranchise Zunis and other tribal people from the mitigation process, from having an equal voice in the National Historic Preservation Act preservation process. So we've been advocating for that, and it's been hard because we've got a lot of pushback. There's a lot of economic and political adherence to the normal way that mitigation has been practiced in the past, continues to be practiced. We are making some headway. For instance, for the last 10 years, we've been involved in the Nemo Gallup water supply project, which is a pipeline that goes from the San Juan River across the Navajo Nation down to the city of Gallup, but it also feeds most of the Navajo communities along that route. It's part of the Navajo water rights to the San Juan River. And so he's been involved with that, and the Bureau of Reclamation, who is the agency for the project, has began traditionally going to the old style of mitigation of just hiring archaeological firms to excavate archaeological sites and not consider the Zuni association to these places. And the reports that archaeologists write, the narratives, are a third-person narrative about how they envision the past, and they make no recognition of the Zuni connection, the Zuni heritage, the Zuni history that's tied to that landscape. And so even through the archaeological reports that are generated by the mitigation process and the compliance with Section 106 disenfranchises Zuni from their own heritage. And so we advocated that there needs to be accountability by the federal agency to descendant communities. And how does the mitigation benefit descendant communities? So after many years of discussions with the federal agency, the federal agency is now willing to consider other mitigation strategies that are more meaningful to descendant communities. And some of the things now that we're talking about with the Bureau of Reclamation is developing video that demonstrates the Zuni ties to the San Juan Basin, which would also talk about how the San Juan Basin figures in Zuni history from their emergence in the Grand Canyon to their migrations to Tijuana, where they are now at the Pueblo Zuni. Another one is to develop a coloring book using Zuni artists representing the Zuni relationship to the San Juan Basin and its ties to the migration history, but it's represented in Zuni images and Zuni sensibilities. And the coloring book would be, the images would be drafted by Zuni artists with Zuni captions in Zuni. And this would be a coloring book that would be negotiated between the Zuni artists and the Zuni religious leaders. And the point is, the coloring book is to be distributed among the Zuni community so that the Zuni community children, one, can learn about their connection to the San Juan Basin, but also some of the broader Zuni community that may not have that history, that understanding, the connections to the San Juan Basin. Another recommendation is the creation of a Zuni traditional natural resources guidebook, which talks about the natural environment of the San Juan Basin, including the plants, animals, minerals, landscapes, and landforms. And this guidebook would identify elements of the natural environment through their Zuni, English, and Latin designations and provide photographic illustrations. And another aspect is to have Zuni elders and knowledgeable Zuni leaders involved in the analysis of artifacts that are recovered from archaeological excavation and actually being involved in providing archaeologists with interpretations of the features that they're excavating, and how we can get a Zuni and other tribal interpretations of the past more commensurately integrated with what archaeologists generate, what then becomes the accepted prehistory of the past. And we also advocate having commensurate consideration of Zuni perspectives to the natural environment. And in the natural environment, they relate to the living beings in the natural environment as part of the NEPA analysis, and not have NEPA analysis just be solely focused on a Western science perspective of the environment, where humans are not a part of the environment. To understand what stewardship means and what this relationship to the natural environment means for Zunis, and how the federal government has a trust responsibility to take that into commensurate consideration when they're doing NEPA compliance and compliance with NHPA. So thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Real briefly, Kurt, this is Shasta. We're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. You're really breaking up. So I don't know if you're on your phone or if maybe you could readjust your mic. Yeah, we can barely hear you. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and introduce Mr. Echo Hawk, that would be great. I think we can hear you enough.
Well, I'll try to speak louder.
It's not the loud, it's more of the static.
It's really staticky, and I don't think it's getting better. So Kurt, we would like for you to do your introduction, but then we may repeat a little bit of what we heard.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I'm really honored to introduce Walter Echohawk. Mr. Echohawk is the Pawnee Nation president, a Native American attorney, tribal judge, author, activist, and law professor. He has represented Indian tribes on legal issues such as treaty rights, water rights, religious freedom, prisoner rights, and repatriation rights. His career spans the pivotal years when Indian tribes reclaimed their land, sovereignty, and pride in a stride towards freedom. As a Native American rights attorney since 1973, Walter worked at the epicenter of a great social movement alongside tribal leaders, visited tribes and indigenous habitats throughout North America, and was instrumental in the passage of landmark laws such as the Native American Grace Protection Repatriation Act in 1990 and the American Indian Religious Freedom Act amendments in 1994. He litigated in many of the epic struggles and has written extensively about the rise of modern Indian nations as a Native American author with firsthand experience. Mr. Echohawk authored In the Courts of the Conqueror, the 10 Worst Indian Law Cases Ever Decided, published in 2010. And recently, In the Light of Justice, The Rise of Human Rights in Native America and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2013. Mr. Echohawk represented the Klamath tribe in a month-long trial to quantify Klamath Indian water rights for hunting, fishing, and gathering, resulting in preserving treaty-protected lifeways. He also represented Tlingit tribes and clans of Southeast Alaska, including the Sealaska Corporation, to repatriate sacred objects and cultural patrimony. Mr. Echohawk has taught law at the University of Tulsa College of Law. He received Oklahoma's governor's commendation from Governor Brad Henry for professional contributions on behalf of Native cultures. In 2009, Mr. Echohawk received the Federal Bar Association's Judge Sarah Hughes Civil Liberties Award for civil rights work in the Oklahoma State University's Distinguished American Indian Alumni. Now, it could be Mr. Walter Echohawk.